Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're in a kitchen that smells like orange peel and rain. The refrigerator humming a soft tide while a phone on the counter throws a small square of light across the tile. I'm barefoot, robe belt loose. A ribbon of steam lifting from a mug I don't quite trust. Lightning brushes the window. Then the dark folds back into place like a curtain remembering its job. And the whole house waits with me, breathing slow, listening for what does not want to be heard. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like seeing our little constellation of night owls. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan hum in the background. And let's begin tonight's journey together. The phone was face down, but the speaker was up, which is how the sentence slipped into my quiet like a cold blade. 2 more weeks of giving her a pause, a clink of ice, a soft laugh I knew too well. Then Martin, my husband, speaking as if reading from a spreadsheet. No, Sloan. We tape her right before the appointment, or she'll test positive. Don't be sloppy. The refrigerator's hum thickened. On the table waited the glass he'd poured for me vitamins. He called them stirred into a milky swirl inside chamomile. My throat went desert dry. I did a very brave thing, which is to say, I did nothing at all. I lifted the mug, kissed his cheek when he appeared in the doorway, and let steam fog my glasses so he wouldn't see my eyes slide toward the phone. Couldn't sleep, I said. Storm coming. He smiled the way people smile when they think the world is memorized around them. The mug touched my lips. I didn't drink. Later, the sink would take the tea in a small, guilty whisper. Here's the elder wisdom reflection I carry like a lucky coin if you want to know what someone intends. Don't argue with their words. Watch their calendar. My grandmother said that while snapping beans, and the sound of the seams popping always made the truth feel simple. Lately, Martin had become a man of appointments. Neurologist, financial planner, insurance. Just being proactive, he'd say, as if the future could be penciled into obedience. The calendar, however, takes very accurate minutes. I padded back to bed, counting the floor squeaks 7, always 7, thinking how panic is a sloppy tailor and I needed a dress cut clean. My heart tried to set a land speed record under an electric blanket, which feels like cheating at physics. I breathed slow and deliberate, gathered the crumbs of my calm, and tucked them away like seeds saved for spring. Outside, the storm rasped across the roof. Inside, my mind began to steady. Here's a quirky sidebar my thoughts offered while my hands learned to be steady. You can unscrew a standard gelatin capsule with a gentle twist, like opening a tiny barrel. I didn't know that until tonight, holding one between my fingers. Realizing powders can look like snow and still fall like stone. I lined 2 capsules on a saucer and took a photo with the volume button Lily taught me that so it wouldn't flash. The little click sounded like a spine deciding to stand up. Academic phrase of the day, coercive control. The public argument that a pattern of isolation, threats, and microsurveillance can function like an invisible cage. I'd read those words last week in an article I pretended was about urban gardening. Now they rang like a tuning fork in my ribs. Invisible isn't imaginary, I reminded myself. wishing the universe came with a highlighter and a patient librarian whispering, "Yes, that part, pay attention. Martin returned to bed smelling like aftershave and success. He draped an arm across me. I pretended to be the sort of woman who sleeps immediately. In that practiced stillness, I made a list. Step 1, stop ingesting whatever they were timing with a calendar. Step 2, appear to continue ingesting it. Step 3, collect a piece of the storm before it breaks. It felt strange. How simple a plan can look when written in the dark. Morning arrived pale and domestic. Toast popped. The coffee maker hissed like a cat who'd read the news and didn't care for it. You and me both. I told it, and poured. I set Martin's mug at his place. Buttered his toast too generously. Kindness is the best camouflage, and nodded when he used the word fatigue 3 times in 5 minutes. Fatigue was the headline he wanted. I pushed it to page B12 by asking if he'd water the basil. After my call, he said, already walking toward his office, already trading hallways for tunnels. He left. The house exhaled. I rinsed my cup, plucked a capsule from last night's saucer, twisted it open, and sifted the powder into a fingertip bottle that once held glitter for holiday cookies. Evidence loves disguise. A pantry makes an excellent closet for the truth. I labeled the bottle cloves, because irony helps me breathe. Then slid it behind the nutmeg, where only memory goes. A text from Sloane blinked. Dinner tonight, I made that quinoa you like. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, with symmetrical eyebrows and suspicious generosity. I typed. Wouldn't miss it. And added a heart. Because theater requires props. On my way upstairs, I paused at Martin's office door. Locked. He used to trust me with everything. Now, he trusted me with nothing but my own confusion. On the kitchen tablet, an alert chimed. Cognitive assessment 2 weeks. The calendar was saying aloud what his voice kept gentle. Before noon, I walked to the corner store and bought real vitamins, B complex, magnesium. And the human belief in turning pages. The clerk asked, "How you doing today?" And I said, placing a tiny bet on myself. Back home, I swapped the bottles. The rattle sounded the same. Sound is such an easy liar. I tucked the cloves bottle into the spice row. For once, the rack felt like a quiet ally that understands secrets without wanting the story. I could tell you I was fearless. But that would be the kind of bedtime story that keeps you staring at the ceiling. I was afraid the way a candle is afraid of an open window. Still, the flame does what it does. I swept the kitchen, watered the plants, pressed my cheek to the cool glass of the back door, and watched a bird argue with its own reflection. I get it, I told the glass. It didn't argue back, which, frankly, was considerate. At 3, I opened the pantry and found the box of chamomile Martin favored for my rest. I measured 2 teaspoons onto a plate. Real flowers. Yes. But nestled by the tea bag string was a faint dusting I would have missed yesterday. Today I did not. I tapped it into my cloves bottle, wrote the date on masking tape, and listened for a soft noise inside me. The tiny click a lock makes when it isn't welded shut after all. From the counter, the coffee maker sighed like a coworker on a long Friday. I told it to take the afternoon off. I won't leap ahead. Tonight there is dinner with Sloane, which means careful cutlery and compliments and, if I play my part properly, a slightly exaggerated yawn after dessert. But before that, I'm going to sit on the porch with my knitting and let the neighborhood see exactly what they expect to see a woman settled in her chair, counting stitches, minding her own needles. If you want to make a trap efficient, first, make yourself predictable. That isn't deception. That is choreography gentler, steadier, deliberate. As I gather the yarn, a thought stitches itself into place. I'm not alone. The floorboards know my steps. The coffee maker hisses for me. Even the phone, traitorous glow and all understands it, will testify when asked. It's remarkable how ready the world becomes to help you once you decide you're worth helping. Somewhere, a forgotten oven timer beeps twice and gives up. I smile. Not every alarm belongs to the people who set them. Some belong to those who finally hear them. By late afternoon, the rain thins to pinpricks, the porch glossed, the house hushed enough for small plans. I tie on a pocket apron, crack the blinds a finger's width, and set a white dessert plate on the counter. The amber bottle clicks against tile. One capsule, then two. I twist. Seams part, pale powder falls into two neat dunes. I photograph with the side button, no flash, then brush a half teaspoon into a coin envelope. Date, time, where collected. I seal the flap the way librarians close a book. Elder wisdom reflection. Pass down with dish towels when a problem feels too big. Make it small enough for the sink. Wash one mug. Label one jar. Fold one towel. Courage shows up for chores it recognizes. My handwriting steadies. The letters look like they trust me. From the real vitamin bottle I bought this morning, I refill the emptied capsules magnesium and faith. The blend I can live with, then click them closed. I pour chamomile. Wait. And sink two swapped capsules where they dissolve like polite guests. When Martin steps into his office, I tip the cup into the sink and rinse until the water runs honest. The sound is cheerful, ordinary. Feeling any clearer, he asks from the doorway. Like a bell under a blanket, I say, letting a drowsy smile soften my face. Light joke one, barely a ribbon. You may have to ring twice. He chuckles. The fridge calendar, all magnets and certainty, keeps its silent countdown 2 weeks. I confirm dinner with Sloan and assemble a small collection kit from what a pantry understands envelopes. Zip bags, a cookie tin with snowmen that rattle when moved. On masking tape I write, pantry tea dust, chamomile box, 3:12 p.m. Evidence likes clear labels and good manners. Quirky fact for your bedside curiosity, standard gelatin capsules dissolve in warm water in under 5 minutes. But in cold milk, they linger like shy guests. Connie told me that once at a bake sale. It comforts me that chemistry often behaves like a tea ritual, measured, patient. No fireworks required. I call Connie. She answers on the second ring. If you're selling vacuum cleaners, I already own some dust I adore. Lucky for you. I say, I only need a quiet favor. I give her the outline capsules. Tea, calendar, a feeling that learned to read. She listens like a centrifuge already spinning. Bring what you have, she says. I'll run TLC and spot tests here, then call a guy with bigger machines if needed. Wear a gardening hat. I don't own a gardening hat. You do now. I'll leave one on the porch. It looks like it writes mystery novels. Before I leave, I check Martin's office, still locked. The key remains where it usually is, when he forgets to be clever inside the blue sugar jar on the bookcase. I leave it, take a photo, and let restraint be part of the file. The printer blinks low ink small mercy. Paper trails limp when they must. The sky is a clean sheet on the drive. I buckle the cookie tin and practice my sleepy voice at red lights. Fear fogs the throat for free. I just shape it. In the rear view, I nod at myself the way you nod at someone stepping onto a moving walkway. You've got it. Keep going. Connie's porch smells like potting soil and coffee. The hat waits on the railing, broad-brimmed, theatrical. I put it on and immediately look like a crossword puzzle come to life. Light joke too, whispered into the brim. If anyone asks, I'm here to prune metaphors. Connie opens the door with a grin that warms the frame. Her kitchen is labeled like a hymn swabs, vials, nitrile gloves, a timer with modest ambition. We'll start simple, she says. Thin layer chromatography and a couple of reagents. If it's a benzo cousin or a Z drug, it'll sprint. If it's sneakier, we'll get clever. Academic phrase of the day: capacity assessment bias. The public argument that tests meant to measure cognition can be tilted by context. Medications. And the expectation sitting in the clinician's chair. I set the cookie tin down as if the words were a placemat. Connie nods. And you, she says, are adjusting the context. We work without hurry. She scrapes, dots, and sets the plates. I label, photograph, and log. The hat sits on a stool like a chaperone. People think chemistry is wizards and thunder, Connie murmurs. Most days it's matching socks. We smile. The room exhales. Faint bands appear, some moving farther, some barely wandering. Connie makes a small then a tidy preliminary, she says, tapping with a capped pen. But there's a spot here I don't love. I'll compare against standards after dinner. No conclusions yet, only breadcrumbs. At the door, she hands me a compact tackle box. Collection kit, she says. Inside envelopes, swabs, a tiny flashlight that could spot a crumb on a ballroom floor. If someone's counting pills, rice flour makes a classic filler. Add a pinch of crushed B complex so the color reads human. She lifts a brow. Household ninja. On the way home, the car's AC rattles. I pat the dashboard like a mule that's earned its oats. Houses drift by, windows blinking with other people's Tuesdays. Mailboxes keep their small, important secrets. I stop for basil I don't need, just to keep my movements ordinary. Back in my kitchen. I tuck the cookie tin behind the flour and let the pantry door close with a modest sigh. On the porch, a jay scolds a squirrel for bad parking. Light joke 3, gentle as a folded napkin, sir. That branch is compact only. The squirrel ignores me, which is fair. Dinner is in an hour. I'll arrive on time, praise the lemon zest, and let my fork move like someone whose mind misplaces names but not recipes. If a pill appears beside my water glass, I'll cough at the right moment and usher it into a napkin. I'll ask Sloane about her new ceramic knives and listen for the word dosage hiding inside her compliments. Upstairs, I change into a cardigan that says approachable and shoes that say steady. In the mirror, I practice the slow blink that reads as fatigue, not fury. Then I breathe in for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. The way a waiting room once taught me. Outside, the pavement dries. Inside, the timer in my chest stays set to patient. Sloane's porch light glowed like a polite invitation, and the doormat said, "Come back with snacks," which I respected on principle. Eric hugged me too tight, a little boy still parked inside a man's shoulders. "Long day?" I asked. He nodded. The dining room smelled of lemon and toasted seed. Sloane set down a glazed bowl and angled it toward me the way a hostess tilts a picture frame. "Quinoa with citrus and herbs," she said, voice bright enough to pass inspection. Beside my plate, a sweating glass of water left a perfect ring on the runner. A moon drawn by condensation. I smiled and watched. Tonight would be coax, not hunt. I lifted my fork as if it were slightly heavier than memory and admired the yellow flecks. "Bright," I said, the compliment folded small. Light joke one, tucked in the steam. If sunshine had crumbs, they'd taste like this. She laughed softly, glancing at my water the way a stagehand checks the prop knife. My fingers touched the glass, but didn't lift it. Inside my cardigan, the tiny flashlight Connie loaned me rested like a good thought waiting its turn. Eric talked work deadlines, temperamental software, the algebra of budgets. His voice tried for flat but wobbled at the corners. Sloane asked about my day, and I told her the basil was thriving. That startled her, as if herbs were supposed to decline on schedule to match a story. "You look tired," she said, a kindness carefully measured. "It's a season," I answered. "They all pass." Elder wisdom reflection. Gifted by my neighbor who outlived 3 rooflines when someone is eager to feed you a conclusion. Chew slowly. The mind digests at its own pace. I let that sit under my tongue while I took a small spoonful and let the warmth do its unremarkable job. Quirky fact then, back to our regularly scheduled evening quinoa, wears a coat of saponins that taste bitter and make little soapy bubbles. You rinse them until the water quits pretending it's dish soap. The bowl gleamed. Whatever else Sloane may be, she rinses well, meticulous in the places that show. She topped off all our waters, though the glasses were full. A hospitality so exact it chimed. Her bracelet tinked the pitcher, a translucent cylinder peeked from her apron pocket, a slim bottle with a dropper top. The kind sold to people who prefer the word tincture. The dropper flashed, then vanished. "The runner is beautiful," I said, tracing the embroidery with a finger so I didn't have to trace the glass. We moved like dancers who'd learned their steps separately and were pretending that meant together. "Mom," Eric said, "we're worried you're overwhelmed. The appointment in 2 weeks, maybe we move it sooner." His concern was a careful road with no potholes. I squeezed his hand. Our hands share the same small scar from a kite string. "I'll be there," I said. "Let's keep the plan." Sloane's gaze did quick math on calendars and curves. The sum failed to please her. Light joke 2. Soft and useful. If I start repeating myself, just act like it's my greatest hits tour. Eric smiled with his shoulders. Sloane's laugh landed 2 beats late. She touched the rim of my glass. A gesture that wanted to be casual and forgot how. I lifted the glass just enough to slide it closer to the bread and set it down again, letting the light bend through the water across the cloth. I buttered a slice with the deliberate attention of someone grading a test in pencil. The knife squeaked approval. We ate at a pace meant to suggest shared comfort. Sloane asked if I'd tried those ceramic knives she recommended. "So light," she said. "You barely feel them." Light joke 3. Nodding toward the board, I like tools that do the work and take none of the credit. She smiled thinly and cleared plates before anyone could object. "Excuse me," I said. "I'll wash my hands before dessert." On a side chair, her purse rested unzipped, a tidy storm of zipper teeth and leather. In the hallway mirror, I practiced the slow blink once, then slipped into the guest bath and latched the door like a whisper that knows where it belongs. The purse entered my hands with the generosity of objects that want news stories. Inside wallet, a notebook with a mint green elastic, mints that smelled like competence, and in a cosmetic pouch, the slim cylinder from her pocket label peeled, glass clean, a faint almond note writing something medicinal. Beside it, 2 disposable microsyringes in sterile sleeves and a folded slip 2 Thurs 2 GT. Sat 1 git, taper 5 days prior to aped, drops and days. A dosing plan that wore manners. I breathed shallow, switched my phone to quiet, and used the side button so there'd be no flash. The tiny flashlight traced evidence without shouting. Photo of the bottle, photo of the syringes, photo of the note with the crease lines visible, my thumbnail in frame for scale. I opened the notebook halfway a page of grocery items, lemons, chamomile, mint, and a column of times. Each matched to a check mark. Midnight had a frowning face. I photographed and closed everything exactly as I'd found it. The air above the sink sat still, listening. Academic phrase of the day: epistemic injustice. The public argument that when someone's credibility is unfairly downgraded, their ability to be believed about their own mind is damaged, and that damage multiplies harm. I let the words settle on the tile. I'm learning how not to downgrade my own credibility when the room tries to do it for me. When I returned, Sloane was plating lemon bars with the precision of a jeweler. "These are new," she said. "A little tart." "Perfect," I answered. And then, "Sugar-dusted and small tart reminds me I'm awake." The crust kept its promise. Eric asked if I wanted tea. "Water is fine," I said. On the coaster, condensation made a tide line. I moved the glass a little to the left and watched Sloane watch it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Connie. Got a hit on an Imidaso Z suspect, not naming yet. "Bring dropper if you can. Proud of you." "Hat approves." I typed back under the table. "Copy. Have photos? We'll swing by later." My pulse tapped like a considerate drummer who knows we're in a quiet neighborhood. We drifted to the couch. The TV offered a cooking show where the onion sizzled on cue. Sloane tucked her legs under her. The picture of ease. "I found a cognitive worksheet online," she said. "Casual, fun brain games. We could try a few together." I smiled. "Another night," I said. "Tonight I'm collecting scenes." She cocked her head. "Scenes?" "Yes," I said. Little moments that remember me later. Eric walked me to the door. On the porch, cicadas stitched the dark together. "You're sure you're okay?" he asked. "I'm learning what okay looks like," I said. He hugged me again. There are things you know even when stories try to shake them loose. And the feel of your child's arms is one of them. Over his shoulder, through the window. I watched Sloane lift my glass, peer at the meniscus, then wipe the rim with a square of paper towel, frowning, counting drops, counting time. In the car, I let my forehead rest against the wheel, just for a breath. I don't pray for punishment. I pray for clarity. The engine coughed awake. The dashboard clock glowed like an obedient moon. I drove the long way home so the night could cool its temper and my thoughts could stack their cards neat, Streetlights passed like quiet ushers. Back in my kitchen, I logged the photos and the note, printed a copy for a folder with the world's most boring label, household receipts. Boredom is an excellent disguise. I poured a glass of tap water and, for the first time in days, drank without calculating it. The basil on the sill looked pleased with its own discipline. I texted Eric, "Thank you for dinner. Lemon bars were stellar." A blue heart and a moon blinked back. He hears my nights. I set Connie's kit on the table, added a line to the log purse contents photographed, dosing note captured, and sealed the envelope with the kind of firmness that sounds like a boundary learning its voice. The house settled around me, the old beams doing their small pops and sighs. A language of wood that always sounds like forgiveness. I rinsed a plate, wiped the counter, and lined tomorrow on the edge of the sink like a spoon ready to be useful. Outside, a cat crossed the yard like a rumor with whiskers. Inside, I let the lamp glow low and allowed the quiet to carry me a few steps farther than fear would have allowed. Morning arrived clean and quiet. Martin left early for a quick run to the bank, a phrase that wears laces and an alibi. When the garage door settled, I reached for the blue sugar jar on the bookcase. The key was where I'd left it, cold and unsurprised. His office smelled like paper and aftershave. The chair gave a little theatrical sigh. Light joke one to the leather. No standing ovations today. I turned the lock, shut the door, and let the room breathe around me. Elder wisdom reflection. The kind my grandmother tucked between recipes. If you must move through someone else's mess, do it with clean hands and a clean story. Put everything back where it was. Leave less trace than you found. On the desk sat a spiral notebook. Tasks. Tuesday, call Maple Crest intake. Wednesday, confirm assessment slot. A sticky note. Beneficiary forms print when house empty. Under the keyboard, a folder labeled tax stuff, which is what people write when they don't want you to read it. Inside a long-term care policy with the premium circled and, in Martin's tight script, ask about accelerated benefit. The computer woke with a prim chime. Password hint first date. We went to the county fair and ate fried dough while a goat judged us. I typed Ferris wheel and the system forgave me. His email was a tidy neighborhood. A folder named Family Health, How You Tuck Wolves into Pajamas, held a chain titled RE Pre-Admission Consultation, Maple Crest. The nurse wrote, as discussed, taper off sedatives 5 days prior to avoid confounds. We cannot administer any medications not prescribed by PCP. Another line added facility cannot accept outside medications. I saved the thread to a flash drive labeled Choir Music. Boredom is camouflage. Hymns make excellent cloaks. Quirky fact for the curious corner of your pillow, many color laser printers scatter invisible yellow microdots on each page, tiny star maps that can reveal where and when something was printed. I use print to PDF instead and let the pages live as light. Back in legal, a draft will dated last month proposed a guardianship if I were deemed incapacitated, with Martin as conservator for efficiency. An unsigned durable power of attorney named him primary. A comment bubble read, have spring up for signature after assessment. S. Not Sloan initials make conspiracies look like office supplies. In finance. An email writer allows accelerated benefit upon licensed facility admission, requires consent. Academic phrase of the day: undue influence, the public argument that consent can be hollowed by pressure, dependency, or manipulation. So, signatures become scenery instead of choices, and courts should weigh context as heavily as ink. The cursor blinked beside those documents like a metronome in a song I refused to dance to. I photographed the screen. Connie's tiny flashlight kept the glare from lying. Copies went to choir music. Then to a cloud folder Lily set up for holiday recipes, the album still titled Cookies, now hosting several not meant for eating.
In a drawer, maple crest brochures. Tucked inside, a consultant's note. If care partner exhibits resistance, consider pre-visit sedation under PCP guidance. Avoid benzos near testing. A highlighter swooped under avoid. Paper clipped to the page. A business card and a smiley face that looked too eager. The printer was out of ink, so I used my phone, photos of the brochures, notes, and a calendar where Cognitive 90 AM had been rewritten twice, then underlined. The trash offered envelope shreds, a receipt for flowering tea pearls, and an appointment reminder for Dr. M. Shrew, telemed. I photographed those too. Light joke too, to the room. Raise your hand if you've ever tried to staple a feeling to a date. The stapler kept its counsel. Connie texted plate shows a Z-drug signal, not naming in writing. Bring dropper for GC-MS later. Proud. Followed by celebratory vegetables because her emoji pack updates in odd ways. I answered. Gathering paper seeds, choir rehearsing. She sent a thumbs up shaped like a trowel. I wiped the keyboard with a lemon cloth, relocked the door, and returned the key to Sugar. In the kitchen, I brewed actual tea and watched steam write soft, undecipherable letters on the window. The basil nodded like a yes that had learned boundaries. I opened my notebook and drew 2 columns. There's taper, assessment, signature, placement. Mine stop ingestion, collect evidence, witness tampering, photograph calendars, consult a doctor who understands chemical restraint, loop in Eric at the hinge, invite police only when the hinge is set. I called my primary care physician's office and asked for a same-day telehealth about supplement safety. If the nurse heard the tremor I tried to hide, she forgave it. 3 o'clock, she said. We'll go ingredient by ingredient. Ingredients friendlier than compounds. But they shake hands. At noon, Eric texted. You good, I typed. I'm making soup, which is how mothers say, I'm building a fortress with a spoon. He replied with a gif of a knight bowing to a saucepan. I smiled and added a line to the plan. Set a small camera over the stove, ordinary backdrop. People confess easiest in kitchens, where the air smells like butter, and their hands have something to do. Light joke 3, offered to the basil as I clipped a sprig. You're the only one in this house thriving under constant observation. It looked unbothered. I checked the flash drive again, then slid it into the pocket of an old choir robe zipped into a garment bag in the hall closet. If Martin searched the office, he'd find nothing changed. If he searched me, he'd find soup and a calendar that looked obedient. Meanwhile, the documents waited in a garment made for hymns. Outside, a delivery truck snored, then quieted. The house settled into the long exhale of afternoon. I let myself rest for 6 minutes, the length of the meditation app I never admit I use, then washed 1 mug, labeled 1 jar, and folded 1 towel, because chores are how courage keeps showing up on time. When Martin's key turned in the front door, I was stirring the soup. The room smelled like garlic and plants. He kissed my temple. Bank was a zoo, he said. Everything okay here? I tasted the broth and nodded. Just a quiet morning, I said. The truth, trimmed and dressed, can be very polite. Martin worked from home with his door propped open like a kindness that had learned posture. I kept the soup on low and slid a thumb-sized camera onto the steel hood where it could see the stove, the sink, and the spot where he always parked my mug. A second lens hid in the terracotta basil pot, peeking through the little drain hole like a polite eavesdropper. The kitchen became a witness with good manners.
At 2:50, I wiped my hands and opened the laptop. Dr. Shrew Square appeared calm, precise. I explained I'd been taking supplements that Martin prepared, that I felt sedated and foggy, that I'd stopped and saved samples in labeled envelopes. He didn't blink in italics or reach for drama. You did the right thing, he said. No unverified substances. I'll order labs to set a clean baseline and add a note in your chart in case anyone pressures you. Sleep, hydration, and keep 5 days clear before the assessment. An anchor set gently in shifting sand. He asked me to upload photos of the bottles and to call if any symptoms escalated. Then he wished me a boring afternoon. Boring felt like a treat. Elder wisdom reflection. Softly folded when you can't stop the river. Learn its name and tell it yours. Don't fight flow. Choose where to stand and who holds the other end of the rope. The cameras. I decided were my end of the rope quiet, steady, holding. When the call ended, I set 2 mugs on the counter, one for me, one for theater. The new vitamins rattled like applause inside a very small room. Martin drifted in, phone still warm against his palm. How's the soup? Recruiting garlic to my side, I said, handing him a spoon. Light joke one. Breathed to the steam. It signed a non-compete with Bland. He laughed and kissed the top of my head. A gesture from the handbook of confidence. I lifted my mug, then set it by the stove so the camera could memorize the choreography, and stepped into the yard to clip basil. I counted to 60. When I returned, the mug sat moved half an inch, the meniscus lower by a breath. I didn't touch it. A person can teach a room to keep a diary. Quirky fact, pinned like a bobby pin behind the ear, basil leans toward the light, not because it loves the sun romantically, but because auxin, a plant hormone, slides to the shaded side, stretching those cells and tipping the stem. Even simple lives curve away from what dims them. Mine would, too. Dinner later, Martin asked from the doorway, leftovers? I said, soup tastes better after a nap. He took his own mug and retreated to his office. I scrolled the live view from the basil pot, his hand entering the frame. The clean glint of a dropper, one measured squeeze, a tidy stir, the practiced wipe of a rim. The movements had the cool rehearsal of muscle memory. My teeth went cold to match. I let the scene run, then poured my mug into the sink and turned the tap until the water sang a higher pitch. Academic phrase of the day, observer expectancy effect. The public argument that what a tester anticipates can quietly steer performance. So decline appears where expectation points, and outcomes bend toward the hands holding the clipboard. If a room expects me confused, I become easier to confuse. If a camera expects truth, the truth has somewhere to land. I needed the outside world to help me stage the story they thought they were authoring. At the pharmacy, I asked pleasantly, audibly, which aisle held those day-of-the-week pill boxes for a woman who can't keep Tuesday from Wednesday. The clerk smiled and pointed. I bought 2 in cheerful blue, plus a wall calendar with large numbers and a pen that writes like a sermon. On the sidewalk, I let my keys jingle, paused a beat too long at a curb, and nodded at a mailbox as if it had introduced itself. Performance isn't lying when the stakes are your own name. It's choreography for an audience that already thinks it knows the steps. Back home, I filled the pill boxes with legitimate vitamins, labeled each square in large friendly letters, and then accidentally left Wednesday's lid open near the sink where the basil camera could see. I narrated my movements as I cooked, stove off, water on, mug here, so the audio would carry my clarity onto the record. Light joke, too, to the utensil drawer as it stuck once, then gave gentlemen. This is not your moment. Take 5. The spatulas complied. At dusk, I walked to the little free library, swapped a thriller for a book of brain teasers, and sat on the bench pretending to wrestle with a simple riddle until a passerby stopped to help. He did, kindly, and left saying, "You've got this." A sentence worth pocketing. People are better than plans give them credit for. Connie called while the sky turned the color of cold tea. GC-MS confirms a Z drug, likely zolpidem, and a microdose antihistamine. I'll package results as household comparison with sources, she said. Pick up in the morning. Also, your basil has stage presence. I'll add it to the cast list, I answered. Light joke 3, to the herb leaves fanning toward the window. Understudy for common sense, Connie added. If you want a physician to review before you talk to anyone official, I know a toxicologist who owes me a favor. Park him in the wings, I said. I'll cue him when the curtain rises. Night slipped in on quiet feet. Martin watched sports as if victory could teach a marriage how to keep score. I set my phone to record voice memos in the kitchen whenever the motion sensor tripped and plated a single lemon bar as bait, dusted with sugar fine enough to show fingerprints. 30 minutes later, the plate wore a neat crescent cleared of sugar. Someone had taken a testing swipe. The camera would know whose hand drew that moon. By bedtime, I was pleasantly exhausted by the pretending. Pretend long enough and your muscles file it under practice, which is helpful when the show opens. I laid out tomorrow's cardigan, checked the camera batteries, and slid the flash drive deeper into the choir robe pocket. It felt like the safest psalm in the house. Before sleep, I taped a note to the microwave. You are clear. You are steady. You are believed. Self-credibility needs props, too. I set a glass of plain water by the bed where the camera would not see, and turned out the light. The house ticked and sighed. The basil leaned toward its window like a small congregation. Somewhere on the desk, a calendar sat like a drum waiting for a hand to touch its skin. I placed both palms on the quilt and let my breath smooth out. Like a road after the snowplow steady lanes appearing where there had been gray. Tomorrow I would collect Connie's report, invite Lily to coffee, and choose which hinge to press next. Tonight, I let the cameras keep watch while I practiced the brave art of doing nothing in a room that finally remembered my name. By morning, the sky had the pale color of a bandage, and I drove to Connie's with a thermos and a pencil list. She met me on the porch with a manila envelope thick enough to feel like a slim book. Household comparison, she said, tapping the tidy label. Inside were photographs of plates, chromatograms like small mountain ranges. a GCMS printout with peaks standing where sleep shouldn't be, and her signed statement about how the samples were collected, sealed, and stored. She had even numbered each envelope in the order I'd gathered them pantry dust. Tea bag strings, the chamomile box, and the stage mug by the stove. The paper felt warm from her hands, and steady in mine. Elder wisdom reflection, tucked behind my ribs if you want the truth to hold still. Give it a good chair, a clean table, a clear label, a conscience that's already washed its hands. People later call that luck, really. It's housekeeping with manners. Light joke 1. To her porch fern drooping like a fainting aunt, you and I are both working on our posture. Connie smiled and added a fresh zip bag of seals and a simple chain of custody form. Not because we're in court, she said, but because we might be. Paper behaves better when it knows where it's going. She studied my face as if checking the weather across a harbor. I nodded. The forecast was resolved with scattered nerves. Quirky fact for the road, the glue on sticky notes wasn't designed to stick hard at all. It's made of tiny acrylic microspheres that kiss the surface instead of gripping it, which is why they hold and let go with the same gentle manners. I like thinking of evidence as polite it stays until you tell it it's free to go. Connie called in a favor on speaker, and a careful voice came through Dr. Rishi Patel, board-certified toxicologist. The kind of introduction that makes a kitchen sit up straighter. I summarized tapering vitamins, cameras catching a dropper, my physician's baseline note, and Connie's preliminary hits. He didn't toss fireworks, only questions dosage, timing, symptoms. My actual prescriptions. From what you're describing, he said. This meets my concern for chemical restraint in a domestic setting. Document meticulously. Keep a clean baseline. Do not confront until you can control the room. He offered to draft a brief letter for my chart and to consult if detectives wanted an outside read. I prefer boring endings, he added gently. They usually mean you stayed safe. Academic phrase of the day. Chemical restraint. The public argument that medicating someone primarily for convenience or control, absent a clear clinical indication and informed consent, is a rights violation. Even small doses can be designed to erode autonomy while appearing helpful. I copied the phrase into my notebook the way you copy a recipe you don't want to forget. On the way to meet Lily, I rehearsed the sentence that would matter most, I am clear, and I need your steady. She chose a sunny table at the cafe between a plant shop and a thrift store. The air smelled like espresso and old paperbacks. Her hair was in a knot that looked like competence tied by hand. I slid the envelope across and watched her read peaks. Notes. The dosing slip from Sloane's purse. Her jaw set, then softened. You are not alone, she said. And somehow it sounded brand new. We kept our voices low and ordinary. Here's what I need, I said. A signal if you think I'm wavering. A second signal if you need to pull the plug on a conversation. And a code phrase that sounds like a grocery item. She grinned despite herself. If I say we're out of cinnamon, it means stop talking, she offered. If I say the milk is about to expire, we leave. I wrote them on a receipt because sometimes the future needs a small scrap to hold on to. Light joke 2, aimed at the pastry case like a blessing. If the almond croissant tries anything, I will deploy cinnamon. Lily snorted into her coffee, then became serious in the quiet way she inherited from me. Do we tell Eric, she asked? Yes, I said, but not yet.
I want him to hear it once, clean, with his eyes on the right things. She nodded. Family dinner Friday, I said. 7. At our place. You sit to my left. We walked the plant aisle after so we could look like people who prefer pothos to problems. The peace lilies lifted their white flags. I can stay tonight, Lily said. Not yet. I need the house to keep telling me its story. I said, bring your bag Friday so you can read the last chapter with me. She touched my sleeve the way you check a seam before the wind picks up.
At home, I staged the room the way kindness stages a surprise party. I set the dining table with the good plates that clink softly. Slid the basil pot to the window at a flattering angle for its close-up. And moved the tiny camera from the hood to the bookshelf where it could see hands, faces, and the arc of a glass, the lemon bars. Powdered anew, waited under a dome like a moon in training. In the living room, I tucked an audio recorder under the middle couch cushion. Kitchens tell the truth, but people confess on couches. I called Martin and suggested we host. I'd like everyone to feel we're together on this, I said. Choosing words like stepping stones over water. He agreed too quickly. The way a salesman agrees when you've already chosen the expensive model. I'll invite Sloane, he said. She'll bring something. I pictured a dropper packed beside a dessert fork and felt my pulse trying to lace its shoes while sprinting. Lovely, I said. Let's keep it simple. I texted Eric Friday dinner at our place. Calm, casual. He replied with a thumbs up and a plate emoji. The modern hieroglyphs for sons who are trying. I sent Lily a photo of the table so she could see where to sit and, if needed, where to stand. I printed place cards because theater loves details and the camera appreciates geometry. I put Sloane opposite me under the brighter pendant. Eric beside her where he could see both faces. Martin at the head because he likes tables with north. Lily's card waited under my left thumb. I slipped Connie's report into the piano bench. The flash drive deeper into the choir rope pocket. And Dr. Patel's number under the landline in the hall, because old numbers still feel like anchors. Light joke 3 to the dining chairs as I tested their wobble. Tonight, you will behave like furniture in a polite novel. One wobbled in protest. I tucked a gum wrapper under its short leg. And the room accepted the compromise. I copied the latest camera files to 2 places, the Cloud Cookie album and a cheap USB hidden inside the sleeve of an out-of-print cookbook no one but me liked. I wrote a 1-page timeline for myself in round letters that don't look like strategy dates, doses, appointments, cameras, calls. On the bottom, I drew a basil leaf and labeled it understudy because it had earned its billing. Before bed, I phoned Dr. Chu and told him a toxicologist had flagged chemical restraint as a concern. He added an alert to my chart, no sedatives administered without my explicit consent, and a note that any cognitive assessment be postponed if I reported unusual drowsiness. Hearing a professional draw a boundary around my name let my shoulders settle a notch lower. The house breathed. I matched it. I set my glass where the bookshelf camera could see it, and did not touch it again. I tucked Lily's spare key under the pot of rosemary on the back step. I wrote a shopping list that included basil, lemons, and because code needs cover cinnamon. Then I stood in the dining room and looked at the empty chairs until they felt like allies waiting to be given their lines. I'm not brave the way movies teach it. I'm brave the way a seam holds under weight many little stitches. Pulled snug, moving in one direction on purpose. Tomorrow I'll buy flowers and marinate chicken and let the day act normal. Friday, we lift the curtain, and when it comes down, I want the room itself to be able to say what happened. Even if nobody else can bring themselves to. Friday arrived with a sky the color of dishwater and a breeze that pretended to be polite. I set the table early, linen smoothed flat, cameras blinking their little green eyelids from the bookshelf and the basil pot. The lemon bars waited under their glass dome like well-behaved stars. I rotated the pendant lamp a quarter turn so it wouldn't glare on the screen when it was time. Elder wisdom reflection. My grandmother's voice folded into the clink of plates if you expect trouble. Set the table anyway. Hands need forks. Truth needs chairs. People talk straighter when their napkins have someplace to land. I laid the last knife and felt my pulse learn the pace of silver. Light joke 1, murmured to the roast chicken as I checked its temperature. Do us all a favor and stop at done, not memoir. The oven breathed out time and obedience. In the living room, the audio recorder blinked like a tiny lighthouse, keeping time for boats with complicated cargo. They arrived in a staggered braid lily with flowers and an ordinary smile that meant we were on script. Eric, with his careful hug and shoulders parked in the future. Sloane last, bearing a salad that required an audience. Martin kissed my cheek as if the house had never learned new words. We sat. The basil, sainted understudy, leaned toward the window as if taking notes. We opened with weather and office talk, the kindling of normal. Sloane told a story about a client who tried to pay in gift cards. Lily asked for the vinaigrette recipe and let Sloane talk long enough to look comfortable. Eric carved the chicken with the concentration of a man who wants to make neat slices through a day that refuses them. I kept to small bites and smaller sips. My glass placed where the bookshelf camera could watch its meniscus like a horizon line. Quirky fact for the table. Disguised as dessert chatter powdered sugar dust, it fine enough can hold a fingerprint more kindly than flour. And under slant light, it tells stories you'd think only metal could hear. The lemon bars listen from their plate. Innocent? Ready? Halfway through dinner, I tipped the conversation like a tray balanced in quiet hands. Before dessert, I said, I want to propose a small toast. I lifted my water and let the pendant's light find it. To family, I said, for the ways we bring each other home. Glasses chimed. I set mine down. And a short film, I added gently, because sometimes home needs a narrator. Martin's fork paused in the air. Sloane's smile dimmed a half stop. Lily placed her hand on the table to my left, where we'd agreed it would be. I tapped my phone. The TV woke to the basil camera's view, the kitchen in soft afternoon light. My mug, my back door. We watched my hand place the mug, watch my body exit toward the yard. The frame waited. 30 heartbeats later, Martin's hand entered like a practiced actor hitting his mark. The dropper gleamed, one measured squeeze, a stir, the tidy wipe of a rim. No one spoke. Eric set down his knife very carefully. The sound a whisper of chrome against porcelain. Dad, he asked. Like a hallway that had lost its map. I breathed and kept my voice low enough for sleep. Here is a second angle, I said. The view shifted to the hood camera, the same motions. the same menu of muscle memory. And here, I added, is Connie's report. Lily slid the manila envelope across the table. Peaks, labels, dates with the square edges of type. I did not press the paper toward anyone. I simply let it arrive. Academic phrase of the day. Darvo, the public argument that some wrongdoers deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender to keep the story under their thumb. And that once named, the choreography loses half its power. Martin denied first. This is out of context, he said. You've been confused, and I was trying to help. Those are vitamins. This is paranoid. I nodded. The way you nod when a storm insists it's a breeze. We can add context, I said, and tapped again. The audio shifted to a recorded call. The kitchen mic had caught his voice the morning after the first rain. No, Sloan. We tape her right before the appointment, or she'll test positive. Don't be sloppy. His words hovered above the table like a moth that had chosen the wrong lamp. Sloan's spoon clinked the bowl, then stopped clinking. Eric looked at her. Sloan. His name on his tongue was a plea turned into a question on its way to becoming a verdict. She sat too straight. Light joke too, a breath like a hand on a shoulder. I promise the next feature is a nature documentary. Lily's mouth twitched and then steadied. And that steadiness made room for Eric's face to learn a different shape. He reached toward the envelope, not to read, but to touch something that was holding still. Sloan tried the A and the R of the dance attack and reverse. She's been drinking, she said. And she's always been dramatic. I was helping keep her routine. You know how she gets. Her voice chose sugar but dragged iron. Connie's GC-MS says zolpidem and a microdose antihistamine, I said, as if reading a grocery list. Dr. Shrew added a chart note that any assessment should be postponed if I report unusual drowsiness. I took one slow sip, placed the glass back in the exact wet circle it had vacated, and I reported. Eric stared at the TV, where my mug sat, patient as a dog that has finally learned to witness. Why, he asked. Not of me, not yet. He looked at his father like sons do when they discover the ground has a trapdoor. Martin's mouth opened, then closed. He rearranged his argument like a man shuffling cards that will not stack into kings. Your mother, he began. And the word mother fired the room like a flare. Don't, Lily said, quiet steel. She slid a single photograph forward the dosing slip from Sloane's purse days. Drops, the pencil note to taper, the crease lines visible, her thumbnail in frame for scale. This isn't care. This is control. Sloane's composure cracked on a seam. We were going to sell the house. She said too fast, too bright. It's too much for her. It's time. The plural hung in the air long enough to grow a second meaning. Eric looked from face to face as if reading subtitles he didn't know he'd turned on. There is a knot that unties itself only by telling the truth you were trying not to say. Sloane pulled that string for us. I love him, she said. And then silence did the rest. It is astonishing how quickly a room can become a cliff. Eric stood. The chair went back a fraction and stopped because I'd leveled it earlier with a gum wrapper, small mercies you do not realize you are doing for your future. How long, he asked. His voice was not a storm. It was a winter. After the conference last spring, she whispered. And Martin closed his eyes as if the lids might be doors. The table learned a new gravity. Lily reached for Eric's hand. He didn't pull away. and somewhere a hinge that mattered did not break. Light joke 3. A gauze strip for a wound not yet bleeding. We will, however, still have dessert. Sugar is not a solution. It's a small light. I lifted the dome. Powdered sugar had settled into four perfect half-moons where fingers had once tested the surface earlier in the week, the camera's quiet art exhibit. We did not eat them. They were useful as stars. I spoke to the air and also to the recorder under the couch cushion. I will be delivering these materials to the police in the morning, I said, and to the district attorney if advised. Tonight, you will leave. Personal items can be collected with an officer present. Keys stay. I am clear, steady, and not consenting to any medication. The words built a fence just high enough to teach everyone which gate to use. Martin tried one last move, the V in the acronym reverse. You're destroying this family, he said. But the room had already learned a new tune, and his steps didn't match. Eric looked at him, eyes unfamiliar. No, he said. You did that. You and she. I placed 2 envelopes on the table, one with a key to our spare room for Lily, one with the card of Dr. Patel in case anyone needed to call a scientist at midnight. The basil leaned, understanding its job as stage manager. We stood, not in triumph, not in rage, but in the slow dignity of people who had decided to begin. They left. The door closed on their shadows. The house exhaled. I turned off the TV and the pendant light and let the dark fold back into place like a curtain that remembered its cue. In the kitchen, the mug sat, unspiked, in the middle of its circle of water. I washed it, dried it, and set it upside down. A small tower that said, "Not tonight." Morning found the house calm as an empty teacup. I photographed the dining room as I'd left it, place cards squared. The basil inclined like a confidant and slid Connie's envelope, the USB, and my notebook into a canvas tote that used to carry peaches. I dialed the non-emergency line, kept my voice slow enough to be taken down cleanly, and said I needed to file a report for suspected chemical restraint inside my home. The dispatcher's tone turned careful. "Bring what you have," she said. "Ask for intake when you arrive." The phone clicked back into its cradle with the modest confidence of a tool that knows its job. Elder wisdom reflection. Offered the way you pour a clean glass when you're scared. Keep your nouns simple. Names of things make the room less slippery. Mug, dropper, date, hand. At the precinct, the air smelled like copier heat and coffee that had seen the sun twice. I handed over the manila envelope and the flash drive labeled Choir Music. A sergeant eased into the first page like someone walking into cold water. "We'll log this," he said. A detective with soft shoes. Detective Alvarez led me into a small room painted the shade landlords call agreeable. I told the timeline once. Let the cameras do their parts on the screen, then slid across Dr. Shu's chart note and Dr. Patel's letter. Alvarez listened the way a steady harbor listens, no drama, just depth. "We'll enter this formally," he said, clicking a pen like a metronome, "and preserve the digital copies. I'm also looping Adult Protective Services to document support resources. For now, you're doing everything right. Quirky fact for your pocket: most stations bag powders in plastic. But wet evidence prefers paper so it can breathe. Condensation is a poor archivist. My envelopes made a neat still life on the table cookies no one should eat. We scheduled a civil standby so Martin could collect basic clothing without creating a second show. An officer would stand in the doorway like punctuation. Tonight, 6 p.m. Alvarez said, on Monday, you can petition for a temporary protection order at the clerk's office 2 floors down. Meanwhile, change the passwords you can. Not the lock's ownership gets sticky. I nodded. Sticky is a dialect I speak. Academic phrase of the day. Trauma-informed policing. The public argument that the way institutions respond to harm should reduce, not amplify, the shock to a victim's body and credibility. Slower questions, clearer options, and fewer surprises make better justice. Detective Alvarez moved the conversation like he'd read that memo twice. At home, I brewed tea that didn't lie and opened the windows so the house could rinse. I texted Lily and Eric a photo of the incident number printed in block letters. I'm okay, I added. And then because truth sometimes needs a seatbelt, I'm surrounded by chairs that remember me. Lily replied with a heart and the word cinnamon to make me smile. Eric sent the quiet sentence I needed. I believe you. The room lifted half an inch. Light joke 1 to the basil as I rotated its pot. Congratulations on your supporting actor credit. It pretended not to care, which is how some stars behave after awards season. At noon, the clinic called. Your chart now has an alert. The nurse said, brisk and kind. No sedatives without explicit consent. Paper with manners. Walking ahead of me to hold doors. I printed a copy and tucked it into my wallet. Sometimes a boundary likes to hear itself rustle.
When Martin texted to ask if we could talk like adults, I replied with the civil standby time and the detective's name. Sloan sent nothing. Absence makes its own noise. I arranged the bedroom so the officer could see every movement, then took a photograph of the closet as baseline. I touched nothing after that. Evidence. Like bread dough. Dislikes being handled too much.
Before the standby, I phoned my insurer and asked them to freeze changes pending a household investigation. The representative used key phrases that sounded like seatbelts clicking. A letter will follow, she said. I asked for it on paper. Wayne tries the windows less when the mailbox is full. Light joke 2. To the letter opener when it snagged an old envelope. This is a courtesy call about your performance review. The blade behaved, flattered. 6 o'clock found the porch washed in thin gold. Officer Nguyen stood polite as a comma. Alvarez waited in the cruiser in case comma needed to become a period. Martin arrived with an overnight bag and a face rehearsed for sainthood. Sloan idled at the curb, more shadow than person. You may take clothing, work laptop, and toiletries. Officer Nguyen said gently. No documents. Keys stay.
Martin tried to make the doorway a stage. This is humiliating, he said. A performance for whoever would buy a ticket. Humiliation is cheaper than harm. I answered softly. Please proceed. He crossed the threshold like a man who had forgotten how doors work. He went to the office, found paper trays filled with nothing but printer's breath. Then to the bedroom where the officer could see his hands. He opened a drawer I'd emptied to spare us both the noise of argument. The room did not rise to defend him. He paused at the mirror and practiced a look meant for juries and old friends. The glass refused to applaud. Light joke 3. To the chair he nearly tripped over. In a whisper, only the floor and I heard, "Sir, we do not offer fall weddings." He took 2 shirts, a pair of shoes, the tie he saves for funerals, and left the rest
as if the house had begun keeping score. Outside, Sloane watched him stow the bag and then stared at our windows long enough to think she could teach them to blink. They didn't. Officer Nguyen handed me a card with the incident number, printed darker this time. "If either of them returns without your consent before a court order, call us," she said. "Tonight is for breathing." The cruiser rolled away. Punctuation complete. After they left, the house exhaled with me. I sat at the table with a bowl of soup that had waited like a friend who knows not to fill the silence. I wrote thank yous on a page titled Harbor Connie for the Science, Dr. Shrew for the chart, Dr. Patel for the stern kindness of expertise, and Alvarez for questions that didn't bruise. I slid the page under the choir robe zipper like a promise to remember the helpers when headlines fade. Eric called. "I've booked a consult," he said. Voice level. "I'm filing for divorce. I don't want my son learning this version of love." He asked if I needed him to come over. "No," I said. "Tonight, I'm practicing the quiet part of courage." We stayed on the line anyway, letting presence do its unglamorous work until both of our breathing slowed. The basil leaned toward the last of the light. I turned it once more so it wouldn't strain on my account. On the counter, the lemon bars waited beneath their glass dome, now a small planetarium of fingerprints I had already photographed and archived. I threw none of it away. History is a stern teacher. I'm keeping the workbook. Before bed, I placed Connie's originals in a fireproof pouch, slid the pouch into the choir robe pocket, and hung the garment bag back in its closet like a lullaby. I set the house alarm for the first time in months. The beep felt new and fitting, like shoes that will carry you the rest of the way. I put a glass of plain water on the nightstand and wrote one last line in my notebook, "You have your name." The night folded itself neatly. Distant sirens stitched the dark and then were gone. The camera slept, the basil, finally off duty, looked less heroic and more like a plant, which is a promotion in my book. I lay down without the electric blanket, pulled the quilt to my chin, and let my breath find the slow, round shape of safety, practicing for the real thing. Tomorrow, I'll visit the clerk with my nouns and my copies and ask the system to memorize me correctly. Tonight, I count 7 floor squeaks and let the house count with me. 6 months is a patient tailor. It hemmed my days into quieter lengths and fitted me into a cottage with a blue door and a kitchen that whistles when the kettle thinks I'm not listening. The big house is still mine. Papers settled and locks changed. But I sleep most nights here by the marsh, where crickets tune their instruments early. The choir robe hangs in a new closet. The basil, retired with honors, has a sunny corner by the sink and leans like an elder who enjoys watching you make soup. Elder wisdom reflection. Something I learned while replacing a stubborn drawer slide. Most repair is persuasion, not force. You loosen, nudge, and line things back up until they remember what moving felt like when it didn't hurt. People respond to that kind of work, too. On Tuesdays, I volunteer at the library's oral history room that Lillian would have loved, labeling old cassette cases with the kind of round letters that make strangers feel kept. Mrs. Devereaux tells the microphone how her father built boats that never sank. Mr. Reed confesses he once stole a peach and then married the girl who caught him. I bring lemon bars that actually get eaten and a pen that writes like patience. When a recorder clicks, my spine decides to stand up a little taller. I take that as progress, not alarm. Cases move slower than rumors. Detective Alvarez calls every few weeks a briefing that sounds like tide tables. The DA's office filed charges for administering a controlled substance without consent, for conspiracy, for fraud-related shenanigans where signatures tried to wear disguises. Sloane's name keeps surfacing in other files: an aunt who slept through appointments, a client whose pills counted funny, a hospice note with handwriting that looks familiar if you've ever watched a dropper think. Patterns don't prove a thing by themselves, but they draw arrows for people trained to follow them. Martin went on a public tour of wounded dignity, the kind that prefers bar stools and old friends' porches. She misunderstood, he said inside those forgiving kitchens, and I was trying to help. The performance has a good first act if you haven't seen the footage. He changed his social media photo to a black and white headshot that made him look like he'd auditioned to play Regret. Plea conversations, I'm told. Rise and fall like weather fronts. My chart note sits like a lighthouse in the file, blinking the same word over and over: consent. Quirky fact to tuck into your nightstand kettle's whistle. Because air rushing through two small slots creates vortices that make the lid vibrate. A tiny flute practicing scales over boiling water, mine sings a B-flat when it's proud of itself. Light joke 1, murmured into the steam Sir Whistlesworth. Your encore is approved. The kettle refuses the knighthood, but keeps the pitch. On Thursdays, I walk with Lily through the flea market, buying old picture frames for photographs no one has taken yet. She tells me Eric found a small apartment near the park, and that he keeps his son's drawings on the fridge with magnets shaped like stars. Divorce is paperwork with weather in it. But Eric is keeping his windows open. He asks after me in texts that say, soup, which is our family's way of checking the horizon without naming storms. I answer, yes, and send a photo of Basil behaving. Academic phrase of the day. Restorative justice, the public argument that after harm, true repair sometimes asks for structured dialogue with accountability, not only punishment, and that communities must weigh when that path heals and when it risks reopening the wound. People mail me articles and ask if I'd ever sit in a circle with either of them. I write back kindly that my circle is small and currently full of chairs that already know my name. I kept 2 habits from the bad months I label what matters. And I narrate out loud when I'm tired so my own voice can find me. Stove off, water on, keys in the bowl, I say. And the cottage remembers. The motion sensor is gone. The tiny camera sleeping in a drawer like old cast members between shows. But at night, when I set a glass of water on the nightstand, I still place it deliberately, as if the act itself deserves punctuation. Maybe it does. The town remembered, surprisingly, how to be gentle. The pharmacist asked if I wanted a smaller bottle so the vitamins wouldn't rattle like headlines. The choir director sent sheet music with the high notes penciled in optional, and I took them at their word. At the farmer's market, Mrs. Ibarra tucked an extra lemon into my bag because justice needs zest, which is either theology or a recipe card. Light joke 2, whispered to the lemons lined up like moons on my counter. Gentlemen. We squeeze at dawn. I watch a boy teach his grandfather the new phone, both of them frowning the same way at the same time. The grandfather finally laughs and says, you know, if it doesn't make tea, I don't need it, which is a position I respect. A neighbor's dog brings me every stick it finds, a kind of courtship. I accept them as writs of peace. I do not pretend the past behaves just because the door has changed color. There are days the pantry makes a small sound and I stand very still before I remember it's just the jar seals settling back into usefulness. There are mornings my hands want to count the meniscus before my eyes remind them we're safe. That's all right. I thank the hands for their vigilance and assign them to the kettle instead. We are all learning new jobs. Letters arrive with their serious fonts. One says, Martin will likely plead to a lesser charge if he cooperates fully on the rest. One says Sloane's attorney requested more time. Time is an instrument that cuts and stitches. I try to let it do the latter. Light joke 3. To the mailbox when it sticks in damp weather. Your grip strength is impressive. But let's practice release. It lets go. Proud of itself. B flat, faint in the distance. On the sill, the basil puts out new leaves like small green flags. I pinch the top to keep it honest and think about all the tiny decisions that made a life when to blink. Where to set a glass, how to choose a chair. The cameras caught hands, the people caught on eventually. I'm not angry most days. I'm busy, I bake, I shelve. I listen to a woman whisper into a microphone that her mother hummed the same hymn every time she braided her hair, and now the song is how she remembers. When I walk home at dusk, the marsh trades secrets with the sky. A heron stands like an old man practicing balance. The cottage light warms the path like a promise that remembers its lines. Inside, I stack bowls the way the future likes them and write a list on a sticky note that kisses the fridge and lets go oil the drawer. Call Alvarez Friday. Remember cinnamon. I don't know what the court will do. I know what I'm doing. That feels like the right proportion of control for a human. I set the kettle on and sit in the blue chair by the door. The room holds me with ordinary hands, no spotlights, no applause, just the solidarity of walls that stayed. Sir Whistlesworth clears his throat, and I lift the mug before the cottage can complain about overboiling. The first sip is plain water made brave by heat. This, I think, is how repair tastes, not dramatic, not sweet, but warm and steady and earned. The courthouse smelled faintly of pencil shavings and raincoats, and the hallway bench received us the way old furniture does, unimpressed, sturdy, willing. Lily's palm rested a quiet inch from mine. Eric sat forward, elbows on knees, learning how to breathe in rooms that prefer whispering. Detective Alvarez nodded once in passing, the untheatrical kind of encouragement that keeps the floor level. I had folded my statement into thirds so the paper would know where to bend. My voice, I hoped, would follow the crease. Elder wisdom reflection. Polished over months when you have to speak on a hard day. Bring nouns and leave ornaments at home. Say glass, dropper, date, hand. Let the small words do the heavy lifting. They don't slip when the room gets wet.
Inside, the air held its breath. The clerk announced names that used to live at my table and now lived in a docket. The footage played without bravado the basil's little proscenium, the hood's quiet eye, the practiced squeeze, the efficient wipe, and the transcript followed like careful footsteps. 2 more weeks. No thunder, just sequence. I told the judge how fog had settled and then lifted, how a calendar had learned to confess, how a house had started keeping a diary. Quirky fact file it under gently interesting. Many federal judges rarely use gavels at all. A pause does the same work as a wooden knock, and sometimes silence is the clearest punctuation. Our judge favored pauses. The room obeyed. Martin's attorney arranged words like throw pillows, plumping intent and placing misunderstood where planned should sit. Sloane's counsel pointed at ambiguity and tried to name it mercy. Academic phrase of the day, procedural justice. The public argument that when people can see the process is even-handed, respectful, and clear, they're more likely to accept the outcome, even if the outcome aches. The judge explained each step aloud. No hurry, no edge,
and I watched Eric's shoulders lower a measurable fraction. Light joke 1, whispered to the metal detector on my way back from a recess. I promise I'm mostly kitchen utensils. The deputy almost smiled, which felt like weather breaking. Lily handed me a cup of water and the tiniest lemon candy as if courage could be sipped and unwrapped. For a minute, it was by mid-afternoon. The findings assembled themselves. Martin pled to administering a controlled substance without consent and to a fraud count for the paper he tried to sneak under my name. No cage, but a narrow path probation with conditions sharp as fences. Mandatory counseling. Restitution that reads like arithmetic finally showing its work. A long protective order that made the room taller. Community service where listening is not optional. Sloane's case. Heavier and wider with similar patterns elsewhere. Brought a short custodial sentence and a bar on handling clients' medications. There were handshakes with state boards that do not forget. A quiet in me, not joy. Not triumph. Just a place where oxygen finally knows its job filled in the corners. Outside, the sky had learned brightness again. Eric stood at the top of the steps and let the air introduce itself. I'm sorry, he said. To me, to everything. I know, I said. And because truths can be heavier than apologies. We held the silence together until it said enough to carry. Lily linked her arm in mine. We walked without performing walking. At home, the kettle remembered B-flat. I opened the window. The marsh sent up the soft grammar of late afternoon. I placed the stamped copy of the order in the drawer where I keep warranties and the screwdriver that fits most things. Documents that defend you should live next to tools that repair you. It keeps the categories friendly. Light joke 2. Addressed to Sir Whistlesworth as he preened. You've earned a promotion to morale officer. The kettle demurred and did his job. I sliced lemons for bars that would be eaten this time, sifted sugar over them with no need to memorize anyone's touch. The basil, easing into an honorable ordinary, leaned without audience. Neighbors came by in ones and twos, their voices pitched to evening. Mrs. Ibarra delivered a pie with a note that said for the chapter after verdicts, and then we stood in the doorway, admiring the pie as if it were sunrise. The choir director texted a photo of Sunday's program, my name tucked between altos like a ribbon. I whispered thank you into a room that answered with floorboard creaks of approval. Light joke 3. To the calendar as I cross-hatched the old appointment. You have been reassigned from trapdoor to skylight. The square looked relieved. I wrote down simple errands, oil the drawer. Call Alvarez with gratitude. Buy cinnamon and slid the pen home with the exquisite ceremony of finishing a sentence correctly. Night settled like warm linen. I opened the piano bench and returned Connie's report to its place. Not because I needed the paper anymore, but because honoring it felt like closing a well-written book. In the choir robe pocket, the fireproof pouch rested like a small, cooled star. I thought about restorative circles and letters never sent. About judges who use pauses instead of gavels. About sons who choose steady when the script asks for complicity. I thought about my name, how it fits now. How it won't be loaned out again. I set a glass of water on the nightstand with a calm hand and turned out the light. The house counted 7 squeaks with me as I crossed the floor. Somewhere, the marsh breathed, and the cottage breathed back. I lay down and let the room keep watch. not because it had to, but because it wanted to. The day had the good manners to end. The story moves like a tide that learns its shape first, a late-night sentence on a speakerphone, then a string of days that turn from fog to focus, then a kitchen that starts remembering in angles and lenses. A woman hears what should not be heard, feels what should not be felt. And instead of breaking the dishes or shouting at doors, she does the smaller, braver thing and begins to label the world. One envelope at a time, one date at a time, one motion made visible for the sake of daylight later. The plan grows quietly. Stop ingesting. Appear to continue. Collect. Test. Document. And wait for a room where nouns can do honest work. Friends arrive in the right sizes, Connie with the patient science. Dr. Shrew with a chart that protects. Dr. Patel with the stern grammar of names. Detective Alvarez with questions that land softly and still insist on truth. Lily with a hand that steadies. Eric with a decision that will not teach his son the wrong kind of love. There is a dinner where sugar is used like starlight. A set of cameras that learn to witness politely. A house that practices courage by letting its chairs behave and its basil lean. And there is a courthouse where the process is explained, where pauses become punctuation, where outcomes choose their proportions, probation and counseling, bars on old habits, orders that make space around a life until the oxygen in the day returns to its task and the kettle remembers B flat. In the end, no triumphal trumpet, only the soft dignity of tools returned to drawers, paper sleeping beside screwdrivers, neighbors bringing pies like weather that means well, and a name worn correctly again, stitched to a quiet that holds.